This is the game's main menu screen from which players can select the tutorial. On selecting the tutorial, the scene transitions to the Player Select screen, where players can select a party size between 2 and 4 players.
To familiarise players with the main input controls for the game, they are shown a splash screen between the main menu and tutorial level.
The UI element below each player acts as a player identifier, as well as an indicator of remaining task completion time. The tutorial is structured to introduce each mechanic as an individual component.
There are 4 tutorial sections. Each section shows players how to overcome each hazard and the consequence of failing to pass each hazard.
The first section introduced covers the enemy ships. The Crow's Nest UI is used to guide the player through the stages of the section with added visual feedback in the form of particle systems and object animations. Players must gather the necessary items from the hold to load the cannons and fire on the enemy ships. If players fail to fire on the enemy before they exit the screen, the enemies will fire on the player boat, causing damage to the deck, which will flood the deck, contributing to the lose condition.
The damage caused by enemy fire can be repaired by players using wood retrieved from the hold to reduce the flood rate. Players can then use the bucket to lower the water level by bailing floodwater at the ship edge.
The end of the section is defined by a tick covering the initial section identifier coming from the Crow's Nest.
The second section introduces the Seagull. Seagulls spawn at random positions around the perimeter of the ship, then fly above the deck, dropping mess which reduces players' speed. Players are able to remove the mess from the deck using the mop.
The third section introduces the rock hazard. A UI timer at the bottom of the screen indicates remaining time before the ship impacts the rocks. Players must reach and interact with the ship wheel to steer clear of the hazard before the UI timer expires. If players fail to complete the task, the deck is flooded with a large amount of water.
The fourth section introduces the whale event. The whale rises from the water before splashing down and throwing any player not holding onto the mast from the deck, removing them from play until a respawn penalty has passed. Players are instructed to hold on to the mast to avoid this hazard before the UI indicates the completion of this section.
The tutorial finished and all task mechanics introduced, players are returned to the main menu where they have the option to replay the tutorial to practice further or take on the main game. The main game requires players to coordinate to successfully prioritise and complete randomly generated tasks that they have been introduced to during the tutorial.
Each task has a weighting which dictates the likelihood of its occurrence and the delay until the next hazard is spawned, which creates an unpredictable gameplay on each playthrough, increasing replayability and providing players opportunity to identify the optimal strategy.
The Crow's Nest UI is adapted during this game mode to display 3 smaller bubbles which ensure that each hazard spawned can be telegraphed to the player immediately without interrupting any existing bubble.
Successful completion of the game sees players transition to a reward island, which when fully implemented, players will receive a cosmetic reward which they can use to customize their character.
Failure to complete the level results in the ship sinking below the waves and returning to the main menu.